Welcome to episode 64 of Think Big with Michael Zellner, all positive, no politics. Joining me today for the second time is the longtime radio voice of the Memphis Grizzlies, Eric Hasseltine. Eric, you were my first guest on the show back in June, and I'm really happy to have you back on today. So thank you very much for that.
No, man, I'm happy to do it. My dogs are apparently very happy about it too in the background. I think they're fighting over their food. So
not a problem. I have three in my background too. They scratch at my door all the time when I'm on podcasts. So
see, you're professional. You got an offense. I'm doing this from my kitchen before game day today.
Yeah. First off, to start off, I wanted to get your thoughts on this past season. Even though the Grizz fell to the Warriors in 6 games in the second round of the playoffs, I think they put the league on notice. It was one heck of a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was special. I actually really thought they had the chance to do that going into the year, having seen the practices before the season started and then knowing the work that had been put in over the summer. And actually, it was funny. I told a friend of mine, I was like, keep an eye on Ja. He's going to be really, really good this year. And everybody went, "Oh, you don't think I know Ja? Like, I know Ja. Why are you like mansplaining this to me?" And I went, it wasn't meant like that. I'm saying keep an eye on him because it's going to be even more than you think. And that's where I was going into the year. And, it didn't start the best. They were 9-10 to start.
Right.
Ja gets hurt in that 19th game. I remember after that game, it was the night before Thanksgiving. It was against Atlanta, and thinking, wow, this could be a lot different than I expected. And a funny thing happened. The guys that are pros in that locker room bonded together. They knew their superstar wasn't going to be there. They weren't playing good defensively. And then they turned it around. And in the final 63 games, they were sensational. I mean, they just were. They ended up winning 56. So if you do the math, that's 47 and 16 in 63 games. And they did it with defense, and the offense was already going to be there. So the first 19, they were just trying to outscore people. And they were dead last in the league in every defensive category you can imagine. By the end of the year, they were in the top 5. And that's a hard thing to do. When you start that bad, usually by 20 games, that's kind of who you are. You don't turn it around just like that. They had a couple of bad games. They were still figuring some things out. And then they got they got the news that Ja was going to be down for a while, and they bonded together and they got back to the basics. And I think that's the maturity of this young group, and also of the coaching staff, to say, hey, this isn't working. Where do we need to go? And, now they're a year advanced. They had a tremendous run last year. Yes, there will be experts and pundits that say they caught some teams at the right time, and they did. That was everybody last year, though. At one stretch of the year, everybody was testing positive for, I think, the Omicron variant it was. I got it. Pete Pranica got it. Brevin Knight got it. Rob Fisher. All of our broadcast crew got it. All of our staff got it. Everybody was turning up positive. And so it wasn't like it was this one team that we just stayed remarkably healthy and everybody else was missing guys. We missed guys too all year long. And so I always kind of pushed that aside and said, yeah, that's fair, but you still got to go out and win the game. Right. And they did a tremendous job of growing as a group, playing as a team, enjoying the moment as a group. And now the group's a little bit different entering this year. There's a couple key pieces that are gone from last year. And I think that was the hardest part on the last game, Michael, was I remember being at game 6 and thinking, boy, we're one layup missed away in game 1 where Klay Thompson made a great defensive play. We're 1 3-minute stretch where, Curry got hot and we did a couple of bad decisions and an unfortunate turnover with a dribble off of somebody's heel. And then in game 6, you just kind of ran out of gas without Ja. But they were knocking on the door going to the Western Conference Finals. And they go to the Western Conference Finals. At that point, if you get Ja back, you feel pretty good, even though Dallas had your number because the styles were so different. But I remember thinking at the end of that game, this is the last time this group's going to be together. And that's the thought of every year. But this was a fun group. I mean, it was a fun group. And part of my job after games, especially when we stay in, the city for the night, is I'll ride the bus back to the hotel or to the airport with some of the players, and hearing the conversations. They were loving every minute of it. I mean, not to quote the old song, but they were just literally enjoying every moment, savoring the success, really taking the losses to heart when they didn't feel like they gave their best, or had their best performance. They always gave their all. But if they didn't put the best foot forward and they didn't play well, they were not happy. And it didn't matter if they were in second place, first place. They wanted to win every game. And there's an attitude about that. And I've seen it with great teams. I saw it with some of those grit and grind teams. When they lost a game, it's a quiet bus ride. It's a quiet flight. When you're not very good, when you lose a game, it's like just business as usual. We're building. This group thinks they should go 82-0. Will they go 82-0? Absolutely not. Nobody will. Nobody will ever do that. But they think they should. Every night they think they should win. And that's the fun thing being around.
After finishing, last season, they had the second best record in the entire league. You mentioned 56-26. Expectations now, for Memphis, they're high. Probably higher than they've ever been. They go from being the 100 to the 100.
Yep.
And the majority of times that they step on the floor, for a game. And, this is still a very young team. How do you expect them to handle that little extra pressure?
Well, it's funny because the national pundits expect them to take a step back because of Jaren's injury, and he's going to be out for, obviously tonight's opener and for a good stretch. And a good stretch to me is 4 to 6 weeks minimum, 6 to 8. They're going to make sure he's right. And I don't blame them for that, because the last thing you want to do is rush a guy back and have it become a lingering problem. And that's what can happen at times. People that always come up to me and say, hey, well, Jaren's injury prone. I'm like, no, Jaren's not injury prone at all. I said, you go back, you're looking at his rookie year, and you're looking at the year that they shut him down because he had a strain in his quad. If they were in a playoff race, he's playing, but they weren't. And so let's not risk it. And then he has an unfortunate, knee injury that happens to players in the bubble when he's having the game of his life, and he plays through it. And then it just took him a little bit longer to get back than expected. And they wanted to make sure he was right. And then this is the foot thing. It's different. It's not injury prone. To me, is the same thing coming up over and over again. You blow out your knee multiple times. You have Achilles problems multiple times. You have foot problems lingering for years, hamstring problems lingering for years. For Larry Bird, it was a back problem. That's injury prone. Getting a freak injury, and one, again, his rookie year's healthy, that's not fair to the young man. So the experts think because of that, they're going to take a step back. And a lot of people have them slated 4th or 5th. But the expectations around the league are like, hey, these guys are coming. And I've said that multiple times. They are, exactly as you said, they're the hunted, not the hunters. And they are the benchmark for young teams to go out and get a big win. Like when teams come to Memphis and they're young, they feel like if we get a win in Memphis, that's a win other people aren't getting. Right. If we get a win in Memphis, that's a great stepping stone for us if we're a young developing team like Houston or Orlando, who's got some really talented young players, even Detroit, who's got young, talented players. These teams that are where the Grizzlies were a few years ago see the Grizzlies and say, we want to be like them. They can't be like Golden State right now, even Phoenix, because they've been doing it for years. This Grizzlies team is still very young. Chronologically, they're one of the youngest 5 teams in the league. And they got younger in the offseason because Kyle Anderson left. Now, Danny Green adds to that age group, and he's not playing, but he's on the roster. If you take away the guy that's not playing, there's not a guy that I can think of off the top of my head that's over 30 years old. And that's a rarity in the league. You got to have that veteran presence. Now, Danny is there and in the locker room, but this is a 2 to 25-year-old led group that's why a lot of people believe their best basketball is a year or 2 away, because that's when you really, really hit your stride. So it's going to be fun to watch because they play with that maturity. They have the youthful exuberance. If you can combine those 2 things, special things can happen.
The Atlanta Hawks, went to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2021. And, even though they lost, they were, considered an upstart team.
Yeah.
This past season, they took a step back. They made the playoffs. They lost to Miami 4-1.
Yeah.
The Grizzlies are also an upstart team, but that, doesn't this team to you seem like it's a lot more imposing and enduring than the Hawks?
It's tough to say because, I don't know exactly how their injury roles worked last year and what their development was. They're good. Atlanta's very good. But you're right. That's the one you look at and you go, okay, how are you not them? They took a step back. They also caught fire in that run to the Western Conference Finals. They just were playing their best basketball of the year. Everybody was healthy. I think sometimes what happens when teams do that, and they have some pieces that can be moved, you're anxious to make that move that puts you over the top. The one thing I like about the Grizzlies this year is they didn't add a lot. They had to come off a couple guys. Kyle was a unrestricted free agent and he goes to Minnesota. And then DeAnthony Melton, you want to get, you can't afford to keep everybody. He's got some value. So you make a move and you bring a rookie in and say, okay, if that's the guy, and as much as they loved him, if that's the guy we need to replace, okay, here we go. And I think DeAnthony's a terrific player. We called him Mr. Do Something because he always did something. And it's still where, all right, our core is this, and we have an opportunity to move some money back into our bank account, whereas now we can sign other guys. Well, then they went and extended Steven Adams. They went and extended John Conchar. They got Ja his extension. Brandon Clark signs his extension. Jaron's now extended. Dylan's in for another year. Tyus is in for 2 years. So your core group is definitely together for this year. Dylan becomes a question mark next year. Desmond Bane will get his extension offer next year, without a doubt in my mind. And then it becomes, all right, where does the money go then? And, that's the hard decisions. Do you have guys in place to take the spots of guys that may have to leave? And so that's where I think Atlanta was a little bit different. They moved off a young guy, and Cam Reddish traded him to New York, who the Grizzlies face tonight, and brought in a guy just to basically let him go the next year because they were trying to make other moves. That cohesion matters. And here's the one thing that people, I don't think, talk about enough. There has been one change on the coaching staff in 4 years. 4 years, one change. Actually, I'm sorry, two changes. One, Niele Ivey, whose son was a lottery pick and is now the head coach at the University of Notre Dame's women's team, left to take that head coaching job. And they brought in Sonia Rahman, who's a terrific basketball mind. And the other was they had a forum coach, and they brought in Darko Rajakovic to replace him. And that was just because the other foreign coach decided he wanted to go back home as his career. Nevin Spahia is his name, that he wanted to start to head towards the end of his career. He was a little bit older. Darko's a younger guy. These guys now, but this group has all been together for 2-3 years. I mean, there's never an introduction period to our coaching staff. Like when we get on the plane, we know them. And that helps the players. It builds a culture. It builds a foundation where when they show up to training camp, you're not trying to implement all these new things. Taylor Jenkins, like, all right, this is what we want to do. Go do it. And in this segment, then you guys just freelance and play. This is what the start is. And then you guys know it well enough to know what's there. Defensively, this is what we want to do. When you see a different look, then switch it up like you guys know. I talked to him about it. It's a luxury that not a lot of coaches always get. And it's one you don't just go, all right, I'm just going to roll the ball out there and let them play. But you can essentially kind of roll the ball out there and let them play in your system because they know it. They know it like the back of their hand now. And that matters.
Tonight's game against the Knicks is the first of 18 nationally televised games for Memphis, which is the most in the team history, and that doesn't even include the 10 games that are going to be on NBA TV. And
right,
there's so many fans all over the country now. And Eric, you said, quote, "You finally have a bona fide superstar as good as Zach Randolph was, as good as Pau Gasol was, Mark Gasol, Mike Conley. They weren't galvanizing superstars. You may see a few jerseys in the stands. You go on the road, there are hundreds of people outside our hotel room just hoping to get a peek of Ja Morant," unquote.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be such a really exciting time that the Grizzlies are starting to become sort of like a brand outside of Memphis for the first time ever.
Let me give you a perfect example of that. So the first preseason game was in Milwaukee, and Brad Jones, who's one of our top assistants, and Jason March, who was our head coach with the Memphis Hustle, but spent time on the Grizzlies bench and then with Dave Yeager in Sacramento, but comes in the preseason to kind of look at some of the guys who are going to be his players moving forward, helps out with practices. We went to the Milwaukee Brewers game that night. We came back to our hotel. There's a bar on the top floor, and we decided, hey, let's just go up and hang out for a few minutes. We walked in, one of the other staff members comes in. He happens to be 7 feet tall. And, there's a couple tall fellas, and nobody, not one person that I could see was wearing Grizzlies apparel, Grizzlies gear, like clearly made it obvious we were here. And you could hear the whole bar going, yeah, did you know the Grizzlies are here? Yeah, the Grizzlies are here. A wedding came in. I felt bad for the poor bride because her new husband was more in tune as going, is Ja here? Is Ja here? Is Jaren here? Like people knew them right away. And it was the same way walking around the next day, as we left shoot around, there's people lined up at the arena hoping to see a team bus. When you came in for the game, people just lined up with signs, looking in the stands. Hey, Ja, it's my birthday. Will you, can I have your shoes? You just didn't see that in the past. And it's a big deal. It just is. And, we joke around the office and call it a jaw tax. Your tickets are probably going to be a little bit more expensive. For our TV guys, there's a few less nights they work because the national TV guys, now they fulfill the maximum quota. Before, when we had 4 or 5, now they're taking 8 off instead. So it doesn't happen on radio, but when you get that coverage, and it's fun, and it's one of the things that they always wanted here. They always thought they should have here with the way that group was with the core 4. And I didn't disagree with that, but I always said they just play a little different. That's why people aren't into it. Ja plays the way every kid would love to play. He plays with energy. He plays with, speed, power, aggression, elevation, and then he can score from any level. And then he's got the charisma that goes along with it, and makes plays that just literally make you go, what just happened? I mean, that last preseason game in Detroit, Niele Ivy's son, Jaden, who's there, and Ja are very tight. And Jaden had a move and kind of tried to show off a little bit. And Ja just kind of did the proverbial hold my drink. I got the next couple minutes. And the next 3 or 4 minutes, I was just like, this is just ridiculous when you can seriously look at somebody and go, all right, now I'm going to show you what I can really do. When you can crank it up to another level like that, it was special. It wasn't directed at necessarily at Jaden, right, but he had an around the back dribble that if you blinked, you missed it. And it was beyond impressive because the defender, I think it was Corey Joseph, made a great play. And he came up hugging air, and it wasn't even close. Like, it wasn't like he almost got that. You didn't go back to the bench going, sorry, coach, I almost had that. That was like, sorry, coach, that was dumb to go after that ball, because what I did was just left my teammates on an island, and Ja made him pay.
Speaking of Ja, you said of him, quote, he wants a ring, he wants a title, he wants to hang a banner in the FedEx Forum, and that's what the great ones do, unquote. We know that ultimately everything centers around Ja for Memphis to be able to win an NBA championship. However, the team went 20-5 last year without him.
Yeah.
What does that tell you about that team?
Well, it tells you a couple things. One, they understand his importance, and they understand that they need to elevate their games when he's out. It also, to me, says that sometimes you maybe get caught watching him a little. He's that good. And I just think it says, there could have been games where, again, you caught teams at the right time, but they played some good teams during those stretches too. So I don't think it's this notion that people come up with like, oh, they're better without Ja. No, they're not. They're just not. And it's just not even, it's not real. It's not true. If they have Ja in the Western Conference semifinals, is it a different result? Possibly. Maybe not. They lost game 1 with him. So maybe it is, maybe it isn't. They won game 2 without him. They won game 5 without him. They nearly won game 4 without him. Game 3 was not their game. And they lost game 6 without him. It's a different way to defend the team. But see, the thing is, even when he's there, not there on the court, he's there and he's helping guys. And that shows the unity. Michael, I've never seen teams after big wins call the team photographer in and get a team picture after the game, celebrate, and say, hey, send that to my email. I want that picture. These guys do it all the time. They want to live these memories for the rest of their lives because they're having that much fun. And a big reason of that is Ja. But because of that, and they know he's got their back, they don't want to let him down. So maybe that's it. And if they can now learn to do that when he's on the floor, it's hard not to be a spectator because it's a lot of fun to watch, but keep doing the same things, then you have potential for greatness here.
And you made that a good point there when you said the teammates know he's still there, even if he's not on the court. And the people that say we'd be better off without him, they're not thinking, because if he wasn't on the team, that enthusiasm, that energy from everybody else knowing, okay, he's injured, but he's coming back. If he wasn't there at all, it wouldn't even be the same. They wouldn't have gone 20-5.
No, it wouldn't be there, and it's just not one of those things that you can even put a number on. And again, they caught a good run, and they were also fairly angry at their start to a man, including Ja. And then when he was out, they were going with the notion like he might be done for a lot longer than he was. So again, his support, it's there. So you never want to miss your superstar. And I thought he took an unfair amount of criticism for that. But if you watch what he did on the games and the way he's there cheerleading and supporting, and you see other guys do it, but when was the last time you heard of a rift in the Grizzlies locker room? When was the last time you heard of the Grizzlies not getting along and somebody wanted out, or heard any rumblings of anything other than we're ticked off that we lost that game? I mean, even the great team, like, look what happened in Golden State the other day.
Yeah.
There's been rifts like that with everyone. This guy's not happy. That guy's not. They don't say that there. Everybody accepts their roles. And a big reason for that, excuse me, is Ja and his attitude towards
it. Just to take that one step further, we talk about Ja, no matter how good of a record, they have without him, which we just talked about, he's the key to their success. He's been called the NBA's most professional performer and a legitimate contender for the most valuable player. They destroyed Golden State by 52 in game 5 without him,
right.
But there was just no possible way they were going to win that series without him, was there?
I wouldn't say that, because that would discredit, and I apologize.
Sure. That's okay. You're fine.
Because that would discredit their effort
right
in game 1. Where if Klay Thompson doesn't make a brilliant defensive play, and again, things that I don't think get talked about enough. They had talked about this one, but it wasn't enough. So if you go back and look at the tape, Ja has got a direct angle to the basket, and a lot of guys will try to meet him at the rim. That's the dumbest thing you can do with Ja Morant, because he's going to be above you. Klay Thompson realized that, and after multiple injuries, instead of trying to meet him at the rim, he took one extra step, a split second quicker, being the intelligent basketball player he is. And I know Klay Thompson's not very popular around Memphis right now because of the comments he made about Jaren Jackson, but that's neither here nor there. His play was brilliant because he came up at an angle which forced Ja to go a little wider, which did not give him the angle of the basket. He makes that layup, we're going to game 7, and I don't have a doubt that they win game 7 without him in Memphis. I say that. I shouldn't say I don't have a doubt. I feel like they're going to win game 7, even though the more experienced team are the Warriors. Now go to game 4. You have a stretch where you're up 8. Somebody misses a defensive assignment, just like the Warriors made a good play, but then a quick trigger 3 trying to feel the rhythm doesn't go. They come down. Because it doesn't go, it's a long rebound. It just bounces the right way, score, and then just trying to set up a play, a ball bounces off a heel. And, unfortunately, Dylan Brooks, it just hit his heel. But what happened when it hit his heel is it squirted towards midcourt, and it's a breakaway. So all of a sudden, you've given up an 8-point lead in 3 possessions, and now you've got a very rowdy crowd into it. So again, I think that was the experience factor. Whether Ja's there or not, that's going to go in favor of the Warriors. But I felt like they had their opportunities to win that game, and to say that they just weren't going to do it, it was tough. It made it harder, obviously, because you need a guy that when you need a bucket, and that's maybe where you saw it was in the final couple minutes of game 4 and in the stretch in game 6 where the Warriors flipped the script. Because remember, game 6 was tight all the way till midway through the third or the fourth quarter. You put the ball in 12's hands and you say, all right, isolate, go get us a bucket, but do it off of a play. Don't just go try to go one on the world. And Ja's not like that. Yes, he will jump into traffic. A lot of times when he does that, he finds an open teammate. So, yeah, I don't want to say it was impossible, but it certainly made it more difficult.
It's so great listening to you explain all those plays, because as you're explaining all those plays, I'm picturing them in my head. You're so good at that. And I bet you over the years that you've been doing this, you have thousands of things like that that have gone through your mind that you probably can just remember, plays that, just come back to your head all the time.
Yeah, I remember some good ones. I remember some bad ones. The ones that stick with me right off the top of my head, there are three that instantaneously, four actually come to mind. One was two were in regular season games. One was the Marc Gasol 3 in the corner against the Clippers where he did the $1 million strut. One was the Zach Randolph baseline jumper in Dallas where I'm looking up and I still don't know if I can look up high enough to see where we sit in Dallas. We're basically at one of the tops of the arena. And Elliot Perry's next to me. And just when it left his hands, our angle, I'm like, in my head, I'm going, that's good. So get ready. Like you're trying to prepare yourself to make the call as I'm ready to call the game winner and call it. All I hear is Zebo, Zebo, Zebo. Elliot just went nuts. And it was the best call. It was just so much fun. Like their own announcers like, oh, he stepped all over me. I'm like, I don't care. Let a Memphis legend step all over me, hit me with a shovel, bury me at the spot. That was fun. And that was what we were about. And then I remember obviously Shane Battier's 3 to give them their first ever playoff victory. And it was right in front of me. And the minute he shot it, I was like, in my head, I'm like, yes, this is going to happen. And then I remember a Tony Allen stretch, I think it was in the playoffs, where he came down and out of a timeout, and Dave Yeager was the coach. He pulls a 3 like 3 seconds into the shot clock. And I remember going on the air going, what are you doing? And then literally 30 seconds later, he pokes the ball away from Harden or Durant and goes on a breakaway and gets a dunk. And I said, well, for every what are you doings, there are way more of the moments that we just saw. And that's what makes Tony Allen so special. It's been a wild ride. It's hard for me to imagine that tonight's the 22nd opening night I will be a part of. The 21st I'll be at. My first opening night, I was back in the studio in our first flagship station. And to say I was not happy would be an understatement. I think I wanted to rip the walls out. I wanted to be there so bad. It's the first game of my NBA career. I'm like, I just want to be there. They're like, no, we need you to stay here. They don't know if they have enough press space for this game. And I was like, you know what? Tell the guy from the Chattahoochee River that's writing for some paper for 17 guys that's my seat tonight. They're like, well, he comes to every game or something like that. Something silly like that. Eventually that year I got to the arena, but it's been, I told this story at my son's school on Sunday night that it's just been a ride that every day, I look around and go, what am I doing here? Like, what did I do right to get this chance? Because I'm not arrogant enough to think that there's not somebody that could step in behind the microphone for the Grizzlies and do a great job and entertain our fans. That would be the silliest thing I could ever think. I am more grateful and gracious to the fact that our fans like what I do and our organization likes what I do. And so I try to take that to heart. And, the name of your podcast is Think Big. When I started thinking big in this broadcast, I thought, hey, let me be the lead voice at UC Davis and I'll work in real estate and maybe I'll get a shot to work for the Kings one day. My big thinking was if I could just do pre, half, and post by the time I was 35, I was going to be great. And then maybe get my first play-by-play job by 45. And before I know it, I was doing pre, half, and post at 28 and I was thrust into play-by-play at 32. And, and now I'm 50 and sitting here going, I still got gas in the tank. I still got tread on the tires and I could do this longer. And then I start thinking about, well, maybe it's time at some point to step aside and let a younger guy do it. But every night I get there and have fun. I was like, yeah, those young guys can wait. Like I thought I was going to have to. You're going to have to pull me out of that chair, kid. Let me tell you what, and I don't care how many weights you lifted. I'm going to do my best to sit down like it's Velcro to my rear end.
You talked about this. Memphis made a few different moves in the offseason. They were already young, but like you said, they got younger with the exception of Danny Green, and they lost Kyle Anderson to Minnesota in free agency, traded DeAnthony Melton to the 76ers. for Danny Green, and they were able to move up to get David Roddy, and Roddy played at Colorado State, so very few people in Memphis knew who he was. And the senior year, he averaged almost 20 points, 7 rebounds, shot 44% from behind the arc. He's 6'6", 255 pounds at 21 years old, already has an NBA body.
Yeah.
What have you learned about him so far?
Great young man, first of all. Supremely talented athlete. People, obviously, unless you read up on his bio, you don't realize he is a former all-state high school quarterback and had multiple Division I quarterbacking offers and decided to play basketball. And I watched his tape and I'm like, okay, Mountain West basketball is not bad. Like, there's good teams in there. Utah State, San Diego State, these are teams that make noise in the tournament. And to be quite frank, Colorado State wasn't very good at one point, and they turned it around, and he was a big reason why. Very humble young man, wants to work. He can shoot it from the outside, but he's got that Charles Barkley type size where he's not as big as his weight, but he plays bigger because of it. And he can jump. We saw him on a breakaway, and it was an effortless cock the ball to the right and then dunk it in transition. And I was like, to get 260 pounds off the air like that, yeah, we see it with LeBron, but what's LeBron? I mean, he's incredibly special. You could call him a unicorn because there's only one of him. Not a lot of guys at that size. You think of a PJ Tucker. I think of some guys that have played in the past that were even a couple inches taller. I mean, they could maybe jump over a phone book even when they were younger. And Roddy gets off the deck. He's got to learn the speed of the game. He's got to play with a little bit of confidence, but a little bit more confidence, but it'll come. That's part of being a rookie. And his attitude is phenomenal. He is like, tell me where you want me to run, where you want me to jump, how high you want me to do it, how fast you want me to do it, how hard you want me to play on defense, which I know I got to play my tail off, and I'll do it. And if I got to sit and watch until it's my turn, I'll sit and watch till it's my turn. And that's a lot of the same way like Xavier Tillman thinks. That's a lot of the way that these guys think. And they come in, these rookies have all come in. Kennedy Chandler's the same way. Vince Williams Jr., who's on a two-way. And then Kenneth Lofton Jr., who really made noise in the summer. Jake LaRavia. They've all come in with, we're walking into a really good team. We're not walking into your typical non-playoff, I was a lottery pick, first-round guy, I'm going to get minutes. They're like, we've got to battle just to get on the court. And we want to be on the court. So if we want to be there, we got to battle. And the best person to teach them that, to be honest with you, is Zaire Williams, who did the very same thing last year. And I remember, Michael, I think you and I even talked about it a little bit last time, where I said, I look at the kid and I go, he's got a really nice base skill set. He's got really good NBA size, but he's got to get stronger and he's got to get to the speed of the game. And about a month and a half later, I look up and this kid's playing like he's been in the league for 4 years. And I'm like, that's an impressive 45-day turn from where we saw you at opening night to, December 1st, where now you're contributing because Dylan Brooks is banged up. And that was great. And, he got to start 36 games, playing 72. He's got the answers to their questions right now. And they've all, to a man, said he's the first one to talk to him. And not that he's a super vet. In fact, he's still considered a rookie until the ball gets tossed up tonight. Until that time, Zaire Williams in that locker room is still considered a rookie.
Wow.
Which is great. And that's the fun part of sports. But to him, he's not the super rookie, which is what they are. And he's not, I've seen him talk to guys. He's not arrogant or cocky about it. He's not saying, hey, young fella, because he's young himself. I mean, we share a birthday. Taylor Jenkins has the same birthday. And I was laughing. I go, hey, by the way, we share a birthday. He goes, oh, yeah, no kidding. I said, yeah, mine just happened a lot longer ago than yours did. And he's got the mentality of what being an NBA player is about. And that's, I think, to just emphasize that point, in the last 5 years, Michael, the league has changed so much with skill sets and the way the game's played, but also the maturity level. These guys are coming in with a mindset and maturity level that they didn't have before. I used to be fairly critical of the grassroots and the youth basketball around the country for some of these young men, where the wrong people are just in these kids' ears. And it still happens. But there's a lot more honesty now that I've seen, having a son who plays for a team that has high level teams, and he's not on one of those per se, but he plays with kids that are really good. But every weekend you're playing other kids that are really good. And these coaches now are telling them from the time they're 8, 9, 10 years old, hey, you may be really good. There's a kid you're going to face today that's either just as good or better. And it's going to happen every time you play. So if you think you hung the moon and you're LeBron, there's one of that guy on the planet. If you want to be like him, then you got to put in incredible amounts of work. If you think you're just going to show up to the gym, roll out of bed and take 50 jump shots and you'll be that, you're in for a hard lesson. And these kids are coming in, and I call them kids because they're 19, 20 years old. They're coming in with a different mindset, because you know what happens to the one that have the wrong mindset? They are gone before you can blink. And it's starting to become pretty evident. They see it. They see guys they played against that they thought were awesome that didn't get drafted in the top 10, that didn't go in the first round, that didn't get drafted, that made it on a two-way contract, and they're fighting to try to get in a league. And you thought that guy was going to be an NBA All-Star. It happens all the time. And people are starting to pay attention to that.
Danny Green has won, 3 NBA titles in his career. And, even though he's not the same player as he was before, age, injuries, and,
Right.
What kind of impact do you think a 35-year-old veteran has in the locker room, and also maybe also to mentor Ja and some of the younger guards?
He's awesome. And, the one thing I've had a chance to talk to him a couple times, and I'm going to be honest with you. When I say I hated him, I didn't hate him like I didn't respect him or I thought he was bad, but I hated him because he did all the little things that helped their teams win. I hated playing against him, watching the Grizzlies play against him. And at one point, Danny was that young, kind of arrogant guy. And he was a second-round pick when he thought he should be a first. He was in Cleveland. It wasn't working. He went to San Antonio. He kind of had an attitude about his game. And his college coach called him and said, if you cannot play for Greg Popovich and follow his rules, you better start learning to speak another language, because you're going to be playing overseas. You have an opportunity in San Antonio to be a part of an incredible organization, which it is, and play for one of the greatest head coaches you'll ever play for. And if you throw that away because of your attitude, you will not get another look in the league. And Danny's attitude changed immediately to, where do you want me to be? What do you want me to do? He's joked and said, we got to grow up a little, maybe stay off the social media, maybe do this. But I'll tell you what, in Detroit, and this is a guy coming off an injury, and he's walking. You can't make the movements that you need to at the NBA level where he's at right now in his recovery. But he can walk around, he can move, he can jump, he can do little things. So he's in the back and doing it mildly, but he's leading the huddle before they break out for a preseason game. This is a multiple-time world champion who's played with some of the best players that will ever play in this league, ever. LeBron, Tim Duncan, take your pick. Yeah. Manu Ginobili, some Hall of Famers left and right. And he's back here with a bunch of kids, getting them hyped up to go play their last preseason game. What does that tell a 22-year-old that goes, man, I can't wait for these 48 minutes to be over and we're on the plane and going home and we get a day off tomorrow and then we get back to practice and we play Wednesday. When Danny Green's out there, let's go out and fight. Let's go out and compete. Let's go out and show the people who we are. We're really good. I can't say every word that they said in the huddle because some of them just are not for children's ears. Right. But it was fun. Even I was like, yeah, man, all right, let's go. I wanted to run out of the tunnel after him. And I realized I was in a suit and probably wasn't going to be the best look if the 50-year-old radio announcer sprint out on the court into layup lines. I think that'll get you fired. So that's the attitude he's brought in. I think everybody in that locker room realizes where he's been, and that's where they want to go. And he's not only been there once, he's been there multiple times with multiple teams. He's been on championship teams in LA and in Toronto and in San Antonio. And like I said, Kawhi, LeBron, AD, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, guys he played with that are phenomenal. And the way he talks to people is incredibly respectful, but incredibly also nurturing. Like, hey, you can do this. You can be that guy. So I love it. I love the fact that he stuck around. I love the fact that he didn't pull the Andre Iguodala, which, to be honest with you, Michael, if he had, I couldn't blame him.
Sure.
Coming towards the end. And I know everybody was upset at Andre Iguodala, and it was more the I don't want to be traded to Memphis. But when you're there, you just say, hey, look, I don't want to be a part of a rebuild. I don't think he understood. Nobody understood what Ja was going to be at that time. You got to remember, nobody had seen Ja take the court. A veteran does that now and goes, oh, no, I'll come play with that young guy.
Yeah.
I'll come play with that team. They're having fun. Nobody knew what type of coach Taylor Jenkins was. And let's be honest, the Grizzlies weren't very good the year before, and nobody was sure what the roster was going to look like when that thing went down. So, okay, let's go ahead and not do this. And, maybe looking back, Andre Iguodala goes, well, I could have done something, because he could have, but it was the choice he made. He felt that was best for him and his career and his family. Fine. I love the fact that Danny Green saw it and says, no, I want to be a part of that. I want to come in and help. I want to help. And think about his legacy. If by chance he can stick around a year, maybe two, maybe he sticks around for a veteran and finds his way and can heal up and can maybe contribute a little bit and thinks, hey, I can help this team next year. They decide to potentially keep him and he wins another ring. Now he's won a ring with 4 different teams. And I don't know that there may be a guy off the top of my head. I can't think. I don't know that many of them have done it with 3, let alone 4. And to be honest with you, I mean, I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse. The West is really tough. That's in play with this group. If they're healthy and they continue on this path and the development continues the way it has for the last 3 years, which why would I believe it wouldn't after 3 straight years? It's in play. They can beat anybody on any given night and in any 7-game series, in my opinion, when they are 100% and ready to go, and especially after another year of experience.
Besides Roddy, there were 4 other, true rookies on opening night roster, Jake Ravia, Kenny Chandler, Kenny Lofton Jr., and Vince Williams. And you mentioned them. Tell us just a little bit more about those guys and what impact you expect them to have this year.
I think the most impact more than likely is going to be Jake LaRavia. I think he's got a confidence about him. He's going to have to learn some things. I saw growth in his 5-game preseason stint. Really, I saw growth in game 1, where in the first 3 quarters, he was looking a little tentative. In the 4th quarter, he really got going. It's just going to be the speed of the game. Having Kennedy Chandler is a blessing, because now you have a 3rd point guard on the roster with 2 really good guys to help him out. Ja's known of Kennedy since he got here because he's big into high school basketball. If Tyus Jones isn't an NBA head coach one day, to me, it's because he didn't want to be, not because there wasn't an opportunity. Tyus Jones, one of the smartest basketball players you'll ever see, as evident by the fact he's gone 6.96 assists to turnover, and then reached a number that myself included, nobody thought was truly possible. 7 assists to a turnover on average is insane. Like when a guy has an 8 assist to 2 turnover game, we all go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's 4-1. To get 8 assists and only 2 turnovers, you're taking great care of the ball. 7-1. That's nuts. So he's got a way to show him, hey, this is how you avoid mistakes. Then you've got other people around him that will take him in. And I think it's tough to play in your quote unquote hometown, but he's been gone for a couple of years.
Right.
And he's got the support system around him to say, don't get caught up in that. So I think that's a blessing. I don't know how much time he gets because of the minutes divided up, unless there's an injury, which we hope there's not. But there will be nights where he plays, and there'll be nights where he looks like a rookie. And there'll be nights where we go, yo, that kid's got a chance. With Kenny Lofton Jr. and Vince Williams Jr., they're going to spend a lot of time, barring major injuries, down in with the hustle, but that's good for them. They both have shown in their stints that they can play with these guys. The guys that they played against when I saw them were NBA guys, and they've got growing to do, and they'll get there. So I like the fact that you can have 5 young guys that you can continue to develop. And if it doesn't work the exact way you want it, they still have market value if that's what you need to do. And you have more picks coming. I think the greatest thing that the team did this year was not make moves just to make moves to appease fandom, where people say, well, now you got to go get somebody big like Kevin Durant. He's on the market. Why don't we package X, Y, and Z in 2 draft picks and go get KD? Because in 6 months, what if KD says, yeah, I don't really like Memphis, I want out. Now you've given up a couple of players, a couple of draft picks for a guy who was here for 1 year. And yeah, maybe it was a special year. If you really thought that was the one piece and it was a 50-50 shot of winning a title at that point, or winning the West, and then maybe, obviously a little bit lower for winning the title, then maybe you make it, but I don't think you do. And instead, you hang on to your assets. You have opportunities to make moves to bring other guys in down the road, possibly, or just continue to develop the talent. This front office has done a remarkable job getting pieces that their coaches can mold into viable NBA rotation players. That's not easy to do. It's a lot harder than people think, and it's awesome to watch.
And I thought it was crazy when he's seeing a lot on social media that in those packages that they wanted to trade for Durant. I mean, Jaren Jackson was almost in every one of them. I'm like, are you
100%.
crazy?
Yeah, the Nets were not going to get anything less than a young potential star, a secondary, really, really good piece, and multiple draft picks. They just weren't. And in the end, I think that's why people said, well, all right, well, then you guys keep him. He's the one who wanting out. We're not gonna bail you out. That kind of handcuffed them. I go back to the Ken Griffey wanting to get out of Seattle and said, I only want to go to Cincinnati. Well, what does Cincinnati do? Well, here's our best offer. If he only wants to come here, let's pull that back and change a few things and lighten that load that we're going to give up to get him. Because you as a player, when you're vocal like that, you make the other teams go, hey, we don't have to give up Fort Knox to get this guy. He wants out. And at some point they're going to panic. So just leave an offer that's mediocre. And if you go back in history at this league and look at those big blockbuster deals like that, like Kareem to LA from Milwaukee. Well, I mean, Milwaukee got a guy named Brian Winters that was a really good basketball player. But for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, are you kidding me? I think they got Junior Bridgman too, and they were both big time role players and pieces for the Bucks early 80s teams that had great success. Well, while they were having great success and never making the finals, Kareem was setting the all-time NBA record for scoring, and the Lakers won a few championships. Big moves like that generally favor the team that acquires the superstar. Houston getting James Harden for a package that included Steven Adams, but Kevin Martin and all these guys. And Steven's been a viable NBA player. James Harden's a Hall of Famer. And again, when these guys say, I want out. Now, as they get older, it's a little different. But if a young guy wants out, or Kevin Durant's still playing at a pretty high level, wants out, usually the team that gets him wins. I did not think any of these offers they were asking for, and they were trying to avoid exactly that, were winning deals for the team that got Kevin Durant.
Speaking of Jaren Jackson Jr., he had off-season foot injury that's still healing. And
sure.
Last season, he finishes in the top 5 defensive player of the year voting, was the number 1 team all defense selection too, averaged 16 points, led the league in blocks with 177. He's really improved into an all-around player going into his 5th season. And, when does the team expect him to be 100%? And what are some of the things that you've noticed about his development since he came in the league?
Well, I don't think they put a date on it, to be honest with you, because the body for everybody heals differently. So they're going to try to take it and just try to hit benchmarks as they go. And when they hit it, they're not setting a date for that. They hit it when they hit it. They're going to be patient. So it would be unfair for me to speculate. I'm not in the medical room. I think that, Jaren would like to be out there tonight, but they're going like, no, that's not going to happen. What I've noticed about Jaren is he has way more nights now of avoiding the fouls that kept him out of games for extended periods, because he would pick up 2 quick fouls in the first quarter and then a 3rd quick foul in the second quarter. So the maturity levels up. He said, I had a chance to sit down with him at media day with some of our Grind City media crew, Lang Whitaker and Kelsey Wright Johnson. And he said, I need to be a more consistent scorer. I need to shoot better from the outside more consistently. I need to score around the perimeter. I need to score with contact. I need to be physical when I get back, and I need to be a viable weapon. 16 points a game is good. He believes he can score 22 a game, and you think about it, they have 3 guys that can legitimately go out and get you 25 every night. Dylan's a potential 4th. But when you talk about Bane's ability to shoot the basketball and Jaren's ability to finish around the rim and Ja's ability to do whatever Ja wants to do, you have 3 guys that can give you 25 at any given night. You're in ball games. And Jaren wants to be that reliable offensive thing. And that's the thing. Jaren comes from a background of a father who played in the NBA for a long time after not being drafted, and saying, this is how you stay in the league. And it was shooting and working hard. And Jaren Jackson Sr. was a heck of a college player. And he fought his way into the NBA and realized his dreams. Now, Jaren's mother may be tougher than his father. She's on it. She's a brilliant woman. And that kind of support matters. It just does. And, they keep him in line. And yeah, sure, we see him and he's into the fashion. We see John, they're into fashion and all these things. Those guys, when the gym doors close and they are in there ready to work, they're not thinking about the next outfit they're going to wear. They're thinking about, how do I get better today and be a better basketball player? When they turn off the lights of the gym and you've gone and cleaned up and head home, I don't care if you think about duck hunting, video games, fashion, binge watching House of Dragons. You take your pick. Do whatever you want to do to get your mind off this, because the one misconception that drives me nuts is when people are like, hey, if you spent more time in the gym, then maybe you would beat this team. That's just asinine to say, because those guys spend a ton of time in the gym, at least with the group that is here now. And if you spend too much time in the gym, you end up not loving it. And that's one of the things that makes this team special. They love it. They love to play basketball alongside one another. They love to play basketball, which is a big step, believe it or not, for a lot of NBA guys. There are plenty of NBA guys out there that did it because they were tall, they were athletic, and there's a lot of money involved, and they were just really good at it. Don't know that some of them truly love to play. These guys are not those guys. And that's the brilliance of the front office, to identify the guys that do love to play and get them here and have them play together and play the right way.
Steven Adams signed a 2-year contract extension worth $25.2 million during the offseason. How important do you feel it was for that to happen for the success of the team this year?
Huge, because first of all, I wouldn't want him to rip the doors off FedEx Forum with his bare hands if he was angry. So I think he's happy. He had a great year last year in terms of leadership. He set the franchise record for offensive rebounds, but also bringing a calming presence to the team, and in a spot where he did not have his best year when he spent one season in New Orleans, and he was happy to have another opportunity to reinvent himself. And I think there were times where he could have scored more points every game. In every game, I wouldn't say every single game I vividly remember, but I remember a lot of times thinking, dude, you passed and there was nobody between you and the basket. You could have literally taken one step and just dunked that and tried to rip the rim down. But he's so unselfish, and his passing ability really caught me off guard last year. And I talked to him about it a little bit. He's very quiet. He's very kind of guarded, personal, comes from an incredibly interesting background. You want a good Wikipedia read, go read about Steven Adams and his father, who, was a British naval officer, and all of his brothers and sisters, and they're all enormous humans because the father was big, and that he was kind of lost, and they found him running around the streets of New Zealand, not living up to potential, and gave him an opportunity, and he did. And again, I'll just go back because it's so recent. We're in Milwaukee. We're getting ready to go to that baseball game. Here's Steven Adams in the lobby of our team hotel. We happen to have a pool table, and we were waiting for a couple guys. One of the guys come down. He goes, in the British accent, "You shoot, mate?" And I'm like, it's just such a weird thing to hear it coming out of a guy that's as big as a pillar outside your house. I'm like, yeah, I play a little. I go, why don't you break? I'll rack him. He goes, no, I'll rack. And he starts doing, he goes, well, how do I do it? And I told him, I was like, you got it right. Solid stripe, 8 ball in the middle, just alternate them. Doesn't matter. We're not playing by numbers. And, I said, but if you ever want an easy way, just go 1, 9, the colors go together, the solid and the stripe, and go around in a triangle and then make it easy. Oh, okay. So he does this, and he's kind of hustling me a little bit, and he knocks a shot in. So then, I have a pool table in my house. My son and I love to play. So I make a couple shots, and he just gives me this stern look. And he goes, "You didn't tell me you were good." And I'm like, "Yeah, I got to go to the baseball game. I'm great. Thanks. I'm out of here before you get upset with me." And got to talk to him a little bit after. We laughed about it, but he is such a welcome presence with that group. because again, another veteran that played with some of the best, played with Harden, played with Westbrook, played with Durant for years, and they loved him. Russell Westbrook loves that guy. And who wouldn't? When you can move like that, that's why Ja loves him too. When you move like that, that guy sets you a screen. Good luck to the defense. You better have somebody there right away because there's a big gap, and he sets a monster screen. And, we saw the whole, he picked up and moved Tony Bradley away from Ja to avoid Ja getting into something that's going to get him in trouble. And two, you're not going to pick on my guy. Tony Bradley is a 7 foot tall, 265 pound human being that when Steven Adams picked him up, Tony Bradley looked like he was about to get upset and then just went like a rag doll. It's like, not messing with this dude. And having that is really, really good. Really, really good. And the fact that he rebounds as well as he does is a bonus, in my opinion, with the experience. It's a reason why he's there. And it takes a little pressure off Jaren. And again, I think that's where sometimes a little unfair criticism comes. Steven Adams, will go, they'll focus on Jaren, and then you're not boxing out Steven Adams. So he's gobbling up rebounds that maybe Jaren goes and gets if it's a different player out there. And Steven's fine with that. He's not a numbers guy. He's not I need my glory guy. I need the attention. In fact, he would be just fine if nobody ever asked him to do a post-game interview. But he wants to win, and that comes through every night. So I like the guy. I'm very, very happy that he does like me and doesn't think I'm the enemy, because I'm like, yeah, that's the one dude that if I saw, I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna walk the other way if he's coming at me and he doesn't like me. And I'm not gonna walk, I'm gonna run and probably set land speed records getting away from him.
Grizzly fans are so loving and welcoming to the players. And, there's an example right there, Steven Adams. We know what happened with him and
100%.
Zebo a few years ago.
Yeah.
You mentioned Danny Green and how, you hated him, and, he's here now and what he's, and then you remember Mario Chalmers. I mean, just broke the Memphis Tigers' heart, and then comes here, gave it all he got, and Grizzly fans love him. So the fans really, they just really connect with the players.
They do. I actually asked Steven about that. Darrell Arthur was also a Grizzly, was on that Kansas team. And he said,
that's right.
The first week he was here, he was wearing a Kansas sweatshirt, and a couple guys popped off. And then they realized who it was. So I said, oh, well, you're with us now. And Mario came, and we talked about that and had a laugh. Mario had even obviously a bigger hand in it. And I remember having a radio show, and I got multiple emails that said, I have been a loyal Grizzly season ticket holder. If they trade for Mario Chalmers, I am done. I will call my attorney and sue for a refund.
Oh my gosh.
Free piece of advice. You can't win a suit when you've already paid for something because the team traded for somebody. You can elect not to renew them. That's fine. But, give the guy a chance. That was college. This is pro. And, I understand. And they're not in unison together. Now, we've always said we want our fans that aren't huge college basketball fans to open up their hearts to the Memphis Tigers. There were way more the other way, where we want the people that are diehard college fans that haven't been huge fans of the NBA to give our guys a chance and try to love them. There's room in your heart to love both teams. It's all the same city, and it's really starting to happen more. I asked Steven about that, and he said, yeah, the reception was a little icy at first, but he said within a week he was going around town and people were saying, hey, glad to have you here. Bygones are bygones. Let's help us win some ball games, and anything you need, let us know. And he said that meant a lot to him. That actually was one of the things he mentioned that really made him feel so comfortable when he got here.
In June of 2019, the Grizzlies hired Taylor Jenkins as their new head coach, and I believe he was only like 34 at the time. And Memphis Commercial Appeal called it, quote, a defining moment for owner Robert Pera, unquote. That they've improved each of the 3 seasons under him. How big of a home run was that hire?
The word Mickey Mantle moonshot, comes to mind. Like, it was just amazing. And you didn't know it was going to be that. Taylor had shown some things in his assistant coaching career. The guy who we really need to thank is Mike Budenholzer. Because when Taylor said, hey, the Memphis job is open, and Mike Budenholzer said, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. And, they're great friends. He goes, I wish you would. And Taylor, I think really believed in, I don't know that he's admitted this, but the way he said it to me, I think he believed that Mike Budenholzer was going to say, don't take it, or you're not ready. He said, you're ready. They would be foolish not to hire you. And they hire him. And I remember that summer league, and the first time I meet him, he's a good sized guy. And I'm thinking, where did this guy play ball? And then I look it up. He didn't play college basketball. He developed a love of coaching when he was at the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school, because he started coaching youth basketball. You're at an Ivy League school getting a degree, and I think business administration, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, where you can write your ticket to a six-figure job with, you'll be at six figures within a couple of years, especially if you do well. And he says, I'm going to go intern for the San Antonio Spurs in the video department because I love to coach this game, and hopefully it will lead me to an opportunity to coach, even if it's young people. He'd never had an inkling of being an NBA head coach when he took that job. Well, lo and behold, he's just like Greg Popovich, maniacal, like will do anything to succeed, give that extra effort, stay those extra hours. What do you need? And so they keep moving him up. And I meet this guy, and there's an energy and exuberance. And the first thing I said to him, I was like, hey man, it's really nice to meet you. Welcome to Memphis, even though we were in Las Vegas. And he says, yeah, it's great. It's great. And I said, yeah, I don't really like you very much though right now. And he's like, what? Like, what is going on here? I go, yeah, it's every point in an announcer's career when you're old because your new head coach is way younger than you. And he started laughing, and I said, and we share the same birthday, so it's like an exact number. And I'm pretty sure like when you were in high school, I was getting my career started. So I appreciate that for making me feel old, but welcome to Memphis. And he started laughing. We had a great interview. And I tell this story, and I don't feel like I'm out of turn. I don't think this was anything he didn't want me to tell. We are at a restaurant in Vegas with some of our season ticket holders, and he is walking around the room, introducing himself, comfortable as can get out. I'm like, this guy's got it. Like he's got the understanding of how to just talk to people and like normal people. And he comes over and he says, hey, I want to buy you a beer and ask you a couple of questions. Once this is done, would you mind staying for like 20 minutes? I said, of course. So you don't have to buy me a beer. And I know you make way more money than I do now, but I'll be happy. You don't have to buy. He's like, no, just stay. And so the room clears out. And I said, hey, what's up, coach? And he says, tell me what I need to know about Memphis. And I said, whoa, not what I expected, right? Thought he was going to ask me. I said, well, that's a loaded question. You may need to buy a six-pack for that one. And I said, listen, John Calipari said it best. If you hug Memphis, it'll hug you back. I said, my advice, be as open and friendly as you just were. Winning's going to help. You've got some talented players, but your system, if it's fun, which it looks like it is, will be great. And I said, and make yourself available, make yourself a part of the community. You don't have to do every single radio interview, every radio show every day, but put yourself on local media, put yourself out there and let people get to know you. That's what this community likes, is they like to know the people that are part of it. This isn't like New York where you're a face in a crowd of 12 million. This is we're tight. We've got to stick together. And so when you open yourself up and be a little bit vulnerable, it'll help. And he goes, okay, that's perfect. And, the next few days they go on and win the summer league. And the first guy in the locker room getting water poured all of them, because they don't break out the champagne for summer league championships. Although this year they got rings. We got a t-shirt. They finally said, oh, we're going to give you a ring instead this year. Like, all right, I got a t-shirt that says champs, victory in Vegas. Great. I'd have rather had that ring. I don't know that I would have gotten one, but he's in there dancing in the middle with them. And he's had times where he's had to light him up. And I remember asking him about one of the first times his rookie coaching year. I was like, that was the first time I saw you get into him, and kind of smiled. And he goes, yeah, I was a little worried. I went over the top. I said, oh, no. It was well-deserving. They earned that one. And he goes, yeah, I thought so too. And I go, I said, you good with it? He goes, yeah, I gotta be. Like, I can't just let that happen and not say something. And I was like, man, we are lucky. And I can't tell you how many times we've been to Milwaukee since, or around the Bucks, and people that know them that say the same thing. Like, you guys absolutely knocked it out of the park. And it's a testament to the front office. And I can tell you this, That summer, not only with that, but the other moves they made, obviously getting Ja, trading for DeAnthony, bringing other guys in, Brandon Clark, trading Mike Conley. That summer in Las Vegas and the subsequent summer since, I can honestly tell you, I have not heard one time, what is your front office doing? Why would they do that? Every time I've heard your front office is making moves that are brilliant. And that's a big testament to Zach Kleiman and his staff. I could start naming them all off, but we've been yapping for a long time. And, Rich Cho, Glenn Grunwald, Tayshaun Prince, all those guys working together to build a culture. And I noticed that after the summer league and the way it took into the first preseason for them, that was the year we went all the way to March, and then we had the COVID pandemic. But the culture within 2 weeks, Michael, and it's not normal in 2 weeks to have an identity like that. And they had an identity quickly. And we were like, oh yeah, this is, all of us that have been around, we were like, this is different. We're going to have some fun with this.
Since Desmond Bane joined the Grizzlies back in 2020, he's had the highest 3-point percentage in the league at 43.5%. Last year, Dylan Brooks only played in, 32 games because of injuries, but his per 36 scoring was 24. He shot a career best, 43.2%. They're both solid and consistent last year. How good do you think that they can be, and what do you expect from them this year?
They both can be really good. I mean, Bane's got a chance to just be sensational. I mean, I feel like I'm a broken record. Bane can be sensational. Dylan is really growing into the type of player they need him to be. He plays with a chip on his shoulder, and sometimes that chip leads him to do things that even Dylan says, yeah, sometimes I try to do too much. It's not a secret. I don't feel like I'm going to upset Dylan Brooks. He hears, I heard you said I try to do too much. Yeah. When you try to go 1-on-3 and there's nobody helping down there to help you, and you take a shot because you're trying to do, I said, I would rather have players that make mistakes trying to do too much than players that just don't care. And there's one thing I know about Dylan Brooks. He cares. He is maniacal about his work, his game plan, how he goes about things. They're scratching the surface. I mean, let's bring another guy in, Zaire Williams, who didn't play the last couple games, sort of. His development, he's stepping into a role where he's going to see more time. You went for a guy in John Conchar who was undrafted, just signed a contract extension that's life-changing money for anybody, not always in the NBA, but for John, he was wondering when he got out of college, where am I going to play? Am I going to be a G League guy? Am I going to be a European League guy? He gets here and he could do all the things that he did at Fort Wayne University and was racking up triple doubles in their conference tournament. And now he gets rewarded. Last year, he went through a stretch that in 21 games, nobody in the history of the game, granted, he didn't take 20 shots a game, but in a 21 game stretch, he shot over 70% from the field and 70% from three.
Wow.
And no one in history had ever done it. And he met the minimum field goal requirements for it. It's not just, hey, I took 3 shots.
Yeah.
I went 3 for 4 in both. There were multiple shots, and it was multiple double-digit games. Nobody had ever done that. He just went through it, and it was bananas because I'm like, every time it just goes in. It's just and you're like, this is absurd. And this is a 9th, 10th guy in your rotation. Now he's a little higher. So, Santi Aldama, where's he going to go? He looks much more comfortable. And then you got a guy like Xavier Tillman, who's an absolute pro. Just last year saying, I was not happy about my role. I lost minutes. Brandon earned them, but I wanted to be out there. And I had 2 choices: pout and not want to be a part of it and ask to be traded, or work harder and be ready when the number got called. He said, I chose to work harder and be ready when the number got called. And he helped them win games down the stretch. And that's the whole locker room to a man. Their attitude is exactly the same. So it leads me to say, to answer your question, those 2 guys, with that kind of attitude, great things await. And what I think for Dez, the biggest challenge is this year, he's not a secret anymore.
Right.
This is not a guy that all of a sudden you go, where did that guy come from? You're like, if you don't get out to that guy, and I think we saw a little bit of that in the preseason. He saw he might have to do some things differently to get open. With Dylan, now people know he's kind of like, hey, he's the guy that he's their energy, their spark plug, aside from Ja, that he's the guy that brings a different level of intensity. So you got to make sure you're not letting him change a game that way. So they're marked. They're all marked. I mean, if you didn't mark Ja from the day he set on the foot on the court after his first game, you were silly. If you don't mark Jaren and the way he can play, you're silly. There's not a guy here that on the roster, as Tony Allen used to say, when somebody wasn't playing well, they'd say, he with us. Meaning like, you can leave him alone. He's with us. He's going to miss. There's no one really on the roster, I think, that you can totally say that, and people will back away from Steven offensively, but even when you back away, he's a great passer. If you don't put any pressure on him, he'll pick you apart. So that's the fun thing. When everybody in your rotation can be a weapon, you're a dangerous basketball team.
Pretty much every basketball fan will be at home watching this one. Christmas Day, national television.
Oh, yes.
First time in team history. Memphis is playing inappropriately, of course. It's at the Chase Center against, the reigning champions, Golden State. That place is going to be loud. I mean, super exciting for the franchise and the fans. And, you'll be right there. Obviously, it's where you grew up. I know it's just one game, but this is a big game, isn't it?
It is massive because it is your first preseason game. I mean, not preseason game, Christmas Day game. Sorry. And you want to put your best foot forward. And the Warriors are going to want to try to spoil that for you. It's a different arena than the one I grew up going to. It's louder. It's nicer. It was loud when I went, but it was more loud because of the building itself being just a concrete 1960s style Coliseum. But it's going to be awesome. And, there are things that, to put it bluntly, suck about it. I'm going to miss then he'll be 11-year-old on Christmas Day. Yeah. I'm going to miss my daughter who's 18 and down in college right down the road from there, but she's not going to want to come to a basketball game on Christmas Day. It's not her thing. That's dad's world, not hers. She'll be with her mother and their family. And so those are the things that suck. You're away from your family. And to be honest with you, I think some of our broadcast family might be back home already too, because we have a gap in between the game before Christmas Day and the Christmas Day game. And the Christmas Day game is the last game of that trip. Well, I know if I wasn't going to be working the Christmas Day game, I'd be on a plane home to see my family too. So It's going to be a little different, but there's nothing I could imagine being better other than maybe the NBA finals, because the eyes of the country are on you. Like, it just is. And it was an awesome piece of news to get, and it's a great game to do it with. And you're going to get a chance to show what you're capable of. Now, what you hope is you don't try to do too much and then, put people in positions where you're trying to show off and not play Grizzlies basketball. That's not who they are. They don't do that a lot. So that'll be fun. And then just the national notoriety of it, man, it's when everything really ramps up. We're going to have 2 months starting tonight of basketball that you're hoping by the time that Christmas Day game hits, either Jaren's been back or he's very, very close to coming back. And there aren't any setbacks. And hopefully, if there's not, maybe he's back and with a few games under his belt. But you want to go out there and just say, hey, when everybody is done unwrapping presents and everything, watch this young team, because you're going to be watching it for a while. And you hear, Josh say that in press conferences and said, hey, take a look at this. Hope you like it, because it's going to be here for a little bit. And that's the fun part.
Morant, Jackson, Bain, Brooks, Clark, and up and down the roster, I think they all feel that they have a lot of things to prove, and things obviously did not end the way that they wanted it to. How important do you think it is for these guys to go out there this season and show the league that last year wasn't a fluke and we're here to stay and compete for a title?
It's important, but it is not defining, if that makes sense.
It does.
It's very important that they show that they can compete with everybody paying attention, but it's not a defining season in this team's franchise history. That will come if they can grow and develop. You may not win 56 games this year, but if you get better as a team, even not winning 56 games, which is entirely possible, by the way, that's what it's about. And the experiences you take. I think the 4-1 loss to Utah the previous season helped them do what they did last year. trailing to Minnesota in pretty much every game and coming back and winning, and seeing how thin the margin of error was with Golden State in the second round helps them get ready for this year. You know, even as many years in a row as San Antonio and Utah won 50 games. In San Antonio, the only reason it wasn't like 21 was there was a 50 game lockout year and they were 37-13. Like during Tim Duncan's run up all the way up until pretty much the end, they won 50 games every year. And that's a good benchmark. But there were games they squeaked to get to 50, but they were still a championship contender because they had the experience. So you never know what an 82 game, as I call it, roller coaster throws at you. You know, you're getting on this ride, and the first game is when you buckle the safety harness and the ride starts going up the incline with those ever so ominous clicks. Like every click, you're a little higher. Every click, you're a little higher. And you know that drop is coming. And then what happens after the drop? So you know you're going to get up to an apex and you're going to drop. And how do you come out of that drop? Do you stay on the tracks? Do you go through a couple of crazy turns, but then come out like a screaming freight train and blow right through it and get back, on track? And that's where this season will be, to me, the most defining. We may not know the value of this season for a year or two. We'll have a lot of fun with it. It'll be a lot of fun to watch, but we may not know what this season meant to this team for a year or two. Maybe they get in a playoff series and lose in 7 games in the first round to a team that's seated below them. Maybe they're the underdog and come out and beat a team that had a great regular season, and they show themselves, hey, we can fight through adversity. You get us in the playoffs, we're a tough out. Who knows? I don't see it unless something catastrophic happens as this team being outside the top 8, let alone the top 6. But stranger things have happened. I mean, they just have. And so, the one thing I know about this group is they're as resilient a bunch as I've ever seen. And they make it fun to go to work every day.
When you talked about how a lot of the people in the national media, they're saying the Grizzlies are not going to be, have as good a record this year, not going to be as good because of some of the moves. But, you're here, you're around the team, just like you've talked about a lot, and you're with these guys. What are your expectations for them?
Again, it's going to come down to how you fight through these times without Jaren and how healthy you are. But I think they're a better basketball team than they were last year. That may not equate to the same amount of wins. My expectations for them are to continue to develop the aspects of their game that can make them elite. And they're right on the verge of that. More consistent scoring from the perimeter, better 3-point shooting overall as a team, more consistent free throw shooting, fewer, I don't want to say fewer turnovers because they played at a fast rate and they didn't turn it over a lot. They had a ton of steals. They had a ton of blocks. They had a ton of offensive rebounds. They were tops in the leagues in those categories. But fewer breakdowns defensively where it looks like, you're a young team that made, clearly a young mistake. Fewer of those young mistakes. The one thing this team does, and teams seemingly have tried to catch on, they can't. They will take the ball after a make, like you're up by 8. They're up 8, and the team comes down and hits a 3 and cuts the lead to 5, and they're dancing and high-fiving and celebrating. And meanwhile, while they're doing that, somebody's grabbing the ball out of the net and going right back the other way and either getting a layup or a wide open 3. Continue to put pressure on teams like that. If they can continue to increase that pressure, they make a lot of teams really, really nervous. I mean, as nervous as pro basketball players get, they make a lot of teams go. I mean, we watched last year in January, James Harden and Kevin Durant played in the game in Brooklyn. And about midway through the third quarter, they looked at each other and said, we don't have the answer for these guys tonight. And you could see it in their eyes. They were coming. They thought, we'll take over. Harden thought he'd take over. Durant thought he'd take over. Wasn't happening. Every time they made a move, the Grizzlies had a counter move. So if those counter moves can continue to be as prosperous, and that's the coaching staff's preparation, which is always top notch, then my expectations are great things, fun basketball. And again, maybe not the same amount of wins because of the injury to Jaren to start or whatever it may be. The West is better. You got 2 teams that get viable superstars back, Kawhi in Los Angeles and Jamal Murray and Michael Porter in Denver. They're just better. But with that said, Utah dropped off. Dallas probably loses a little bit without Jalen Brunson, although they're still very, very good. What are the Lakers now this year? How do they fit into it? It doesn't look all that harmonious right now with some of the things that we've seen, but and where do the Warriors go? That incident with Draymond and Jordan Poole is interesting. So you may have a year, because the separation is so great. And I'll never forget this season because the Grizzlies were in the playoff mix, where all 8 playoff teams one year won 50 games. All 8. They just beat up on every one of the non-playoff teams. Like the teams outside the playoffs, I think the Grizzlies were like 10 games back. They won like 40 or 41. Nobody else was over 500. Everybody outside that, and most of them were like 25 and 57, 28 and 54. The only wins they were getting were against each other. So that to me will also be a telltale sign, because the sign of great teams, they play young teams and teams that aren't that great, that are maybe going through a roster changeover. I never want to say a bad team because I think that's disrespectful, because guys are in the NBA for a reason, but teams that aren't as talented, aren't as deep, and not taking them lightly, not going out there and thinking we can just tear off the jersey, tear off the warmups, toss the ball in the air, and 48 minutes later, we got to win no matter what kind of effort we put in. And I didn't see a lot of that last year. I don't expect to see it this year.
There's so much energy and excitement around the team. And I know that the city and all the fans of the Grizzlies are so ready for the season, to tip off tonight at home against the Knicks. And, once again, just to remind everybody, the Grizzlies tonight open their season against the New York Knicks at the FedEx Forum.
Yep.
Tip off is at 6:30 p.m. Central. You can watch the game on Valley Sports Southeast with Pete Pranica and Brevin Knight. It's also being aired nationally on ESPN and NBA television. And you can always listen to the game on 92.9 ESPN radio with the one and only Eric Hasseltine, who's here today, who's, I believe, starting your 19th year as a radio play-by-play for the team.
19th full. Well, yeah, this is year 22 overall. The first 3 were pre-half and post, and the first one was the only year I didn't do sideline reporting there. And then halfway into that first season in the Forum, I took over after Don Poyer passed away on January 21st, 2005. I took over January 20. He passed on the 21st, and I believe we played on the 22nd. And so I took over on the 23rd. And so, yeah, it's 18th full, 19th season where I've done it on a regular basis. But yeah, man, it's crazy. I never expected that. Pete's been here since we opened the Forum, so this is his 19th season. Brevin's been here double-digit years. I think it's year 12 for Brevin, maybe year 13. I don't know off the top of my head. Rob is, I think, a year longer. Elliott's been here double-digit years. The rookie of our group is Michael Wallace on the side, who's now been here like 6 or 7. Jessica Benson does a terrific job. That position changes over a little more often, but we've got some stability in that department that not a lot of teams have. I mean, when I look around the league and I start looking at play-by-play tandems, we're one of the longest tenured duos with our teams. Like if you add up our years, and some guys have worked their job for 35 years. So, but like together, not 35 years and the new guy has 3. And so you've worked, you've got 38 years of experience. We're talking about together, same guys, same voices. We've got something that's been rare, and it's special to be part of that.
Eric, I know this is obviously a very exciting and busy time for you. So I really appreciate you coming on,
Happy
today.
to do it.
I know you got the game tonight. You got to prepare for it. So go Grizz.
Oh no, man. I locked up all that yesterday. It was great. And my son was at school, and I sat around the house. It was quiet. It was like that chilly, fall air came through Tuesday. And I was like, well, I'm certainly not golfing today or playing tennis. So 9 a.m. came, and I made a little breakfast and sat down at the computer for about 4 or 5 hours, just reading up on the Knicks. And I already knew the stuff about the Grizz, just got everything ready. So today is kind of a cakewalk. Today is the day where I have to walk around and not make myself nervous all day.
Well, I'm sure you're going to do great tonight, as you always do. So thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, as always, man. Congrats on the podcast. You're cranking out episodes. What is it, 67 you said?
Yeah.
Look at you, brother. That's awesome. It won't be long before 100. That's a special mile mark. So
thanks. I'm really loving it.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. I appreciate you having me, as always.
Thanks always. You too.